For years, I thought compassion meant giving more patience, more kindness, more of myself, until there was nothing left. And honestly, it made me resent people. I kept waiting for some profound spiritual breakthrough, something complicated and hard-won. Then I found one line from the Buddha, 7 words that stopped me completely. It had nothing to do with giving more. It was about something I'd been doing backwards my entire life. Today, that one line is yours. In the forests of northern India, not far from the banks of the Ganges, there's a place called the Deer Park. Deer graze quietly there. Leaves stir in the wind. Somewhere in the distance, a river moves. Even in the height of summer, there is a stillness in that place, as though the heat has agreed to stay outside. 5 wandering monks were seated there, waiting. They had been waiting for some time. Each sat in his own silence, eyes closed, lost somewhere within himself. Then, slowly, a figure came walking toward them through the trees. There was something unusual about the way he moved, unhurried, but not hesitant, not rushing toward a destination, and yet already somehow arrived, as though the walking itself was already the answer. One by one, the 5 monks opened their eyes. The wind moved through the trees a second time, and in that movement of air, so small, so ordinary, something was already being offered. A leaf turned over, a bird shifted on a branch. The world leaned forward, just slightly, the way a person does when they are about to hear something they have always known, but never found words for. The figure approaching them was the Buddha. Once these 5 men had been his companions. Together, they had pushed their bodies to the edge, fasting for days, holding their breath, punishing themselves with every discipline they could imagine. Among them all, he had been the most severe with himself. They had watched him quietly, with something close to reverence. If anyone would break through to the other side, they believed it would be him. They had promised themselves they would be the first to sit at his feet when that day came. Then one morning, everything changed. Word reached them that he had stopped. He had accepted a bowl of rice porridge from a village girl and eaten it. When they heard this, the disappointment on their faces was unmistakable. "He has fallen," one of them said. The others nodded. Without another word, they gathered their things and left for the Deer Park. Time passed. What they didn't know was what came next. He sat beneath a fig tree and entered a deep stillness. Sometime before dawn, something opened in him, something the texts call awakening. But for a while after that, he told no one. He sat alone in the forest, quiet. Why? Because he wasn't sure it could be spoken. Whatever he had touched, could words carry it? Could another person receive it? The ancient texts tell us that he hesitated. He wondered if what he had seen was simply too fine, too deep, too easily lost in language. But then something shifted in him. He looked out at the world. He saw people suffering, caught in confusion, sinking, struggling to find ground beneath their feet. And something in him could not stay still. Could he stand on the shore having crossed and simply watch? Could he keep this to himself while others were drowning? He stood up, and he began to walk toward the Deer Park, toward the 5 men who had left him. He may not have expected a warm welcome, and when the monks first spotted him in the distance, something in them tightened. "Don't come near us," one of them may have thought. "We have nothing to say to someone who gave up." But as he came closer, as they actually saw his face, something stopped them. He was different. Something in his eyes had changed. This was not the man who had left. Without quite knowing why, all 5 of them sat up straight. He sat down among them and spoke quietly. "Friends," he said, "there is suffering in this life. Suffering has causes, and when those causes are seen clearly, suffering begins to look different. There is a path that leads there." The 5 monks listened without a word. The words didn't arrive in the mind first. They seemed to land somewhere lower, somewhere in the chest. That kind of words. He continued, "Neither self-punishment nor self-indulgence will open the way. A string pulled too tight will snap, too loose and it makes no sound. The music lives somewhere in between." One of the 5 monks, a man named Kundana, understood something deeply. Those who witnessed it said his eyes grew quietly bright. The Buddha smiled. This was the first teaching, the first words spoken after the awakening, spoken not to the sky, not to the forest, but to 5 specific human beings sitting in front of him. The day the Buddha turned toward others, not toward an audience, toward 5 men who had once walked away from him. Why did he start speaking? That is where the heart of bodhicitta lives. Bodhicitta is often translated as the mind of awakening, the wish to become free from suffering. But let's pause here for a moment. When we hear the wish to awaken, most of us imagine something like personal effort, more practice, more discipline, work hard enough, and one day you'll escape your pain. But the Buddha's awakening didn't stop there. Even after he had crossed to the other shore, his heart kept moving. It moved toward one thing, the people still struggling in the water. Awakening wasn't a private finish line. The moment he saw others suffering and could not remain still, that movement itself was bodhicitta in its truest form. Let's look more closely at how suffering actually works. When we're in pain, our instinct is to think, something is missing. Not enough money, not enough love, not enough time, not enough ability. Buddhism gently pushes back on this. Suffering doesn't arise because something is absent. It arises because we are gripping, tightly, often invisibly, a belief that things should be a certain way, that this moment should stay, that this person should be different, that life should have gone another direction. Between that invisible belief and the reality in front of us, a gap opens. That gap is where suffering lives. When the Buddha said there is suffering in life, he wasn't making a bleak announcement. He was pointing at a structure, cause and effect. Suffering exists, it has causes, and when those causes are seen, suffering begins to show a different face. All 3 parts belong together. Seen clearly, not eliminated, not overcome. This is where Buddhism parts ways with self-improvement. The goal isn't to push past pain or pivot to positivity. The path is to look at suffering honestly, carefully, with full attention, to see its shape. That seeing is itself the beginning of something. Here's one more thing worth sitting with. We say my suffering as though it belongs to us. But does it really? Suffering arises when conditions gather. Exhaustion, loneliness, loss. When those conditions shift, the suffering shifts too. It is not a possession. It is not something we own and must carry forever. When we clench it, this is mine to bear, it becomes heavier, because we've added the weight of ownership on top of it. Loosening that grip, even slightly, changes the relationship. Bodhicitta is the heart that wakes up inside that loosening, the heart that begins to see, I am not the only one carrying something. That woman over there is carrying something too, and that man, and that child. The Buddha didn't begin speaking because he had everything figured out and was ready to teach. He began speaking because people were hurting, and he could not stay silent. Those 2 things, his own seeing and his turning toward others, were not separate. They were the same movement. That movement is still available to us, right now, in this room. Not as a distant ideal to be achieved after years of practice, but in the simple moment when you notice someone struggling, and something in you responds, before the thinking begins, before you decide whether to help. That response, however small, however quiet, is the same fire. So, where does this show up in our daily lives? Let me offer 3 small scenes. First, you're at work. A colleague is clearly struggling, deadlines piling up, face drawn, skipping lunch again. You notice. Something in you wants to say something. But then the familiar hesitations come. Maybe they want to be left alone. I'm not exactly thriving myself. What if I make it worse? What if it gets complicated? So you say nothing and walk past. But notice what happened before the hesitations. That first small pull. That wanting to do something. That was bodhicitta beginning. Not a grand gesture. Just a flicker. A moment of contact between their pain and something inside you. What Buddhism calls compassion isn't about forcing yourself to be kind. It's what arises when another person's pain lands in the same place in you where your own pain lives. It doesn't require a plan or perfect words. It only asks that you don't immediately look away, Second scene. You're with your child. They're crying. Some days that sound feels unbearable. You just need it to stop. Other days the exact same cry reaches you differently, and your heart goes out to them. Same sound. Completely different experience. When you're exhausted, you're not really hearing your child. You're hearing your own depletion. Your inner state is coloring what you perceive. Buddhism notices this carefully. The world outside hasn't changed. Something inside is deciding what we see. Growing bodhichitta isn't about trying harder to be patient. It's about noticing this mechanism, that our perception is always being shaped by our inner weather. Seeing that is already a kind of freedom. Third scene, you're somewhere in the middle of your life, and the question is getting heavier. Did I make the right choices? Is this what I wanted? There's a low, persistent feeling of not enough that follows you from year to year. When we're organized entirely around my life, my fulfillment, my legacy, there is always a gap. Always something the story demands that hasn't arrived yet. But when the question shifts slightly, when we begin to ask, is there someone whose struggle I could touch, even a little? Something in the structure changes. Not because helping others is a trick for feeling better, but because I exist inside a web of relationships, not outside of them. The Buddha didn't walk toward the deer park after accumulating enough inner resources. He walked because other people were there, and they were suffering. The walking and the seeing happened together. You were shaped by every person who ever hurt you, held you, taught you, or passed you on the street. The boundary between my life and other lives has always been softer than it looked. And this is what the tradition points to when it speaks of interdependence. Not a philosophical abstraction, but a lived reality. But something you can feel the moment you really look at the person behind the cash register, the one who has been on their feet since before you woke up, and you meet their eyes for just a second longer than usual. Is there something you can actually do starting today? Just one thing. Today, look at one person a little more carefully than usual. At work, at home, on the street. Among all the faces you pass without really seeing, choose one. You don't have to say anything to them. You don't have to help. Just look. There is a practice that the Buddhist students have carried for 2,500 years. You close your eyes and call to mind someone close to you. You hold them in your thoughts and quietly wish, may this person be free from suffering. Then someone a little further away. Then a stranger. Then finally yourself. This isn't a performance of emotions you don't feel. It's simpler than that. Just bring someone to mind. Even someone you're angry with. Even someone things have been difficult with. Just hold their face there for a moment and let yourself think they might be carrying something heavy too. I won't promise you that something will change. The other person won't change. The situation won't resolve. But something quiet might move inside you. That movement, however small, is where bodhicitta begins. Tonight before you sleep, try this. Close your eyes and think of one person you encountered today. Just their face. Just they're carrying something too in their own way. No words required. No action required. Just that. The Buddha's first step toward the deer park started with nothing more than knowing. People are hurting out there. That knowing was enough to make him stand up. Your knowing, too, is enough. You don't need to have resolved anything, or healed anything, or even understood it. A monk once described it this way. He had walked past the same beggar every morning for weeks, barely glancing down. One day, for no particular reason, he looked. Just looked. He said he didn't give anything, didn't speak. But that night, for the first time, the man appeared in his dreams, not as a stranger, but as someone known. That was all. And yet something had shifted, quietly, like a door that had been standing ajar finally swinging open. This is how it begins. Not with grand resolve, but with one face, held gently in the mind, just long enough to become real. When was the last time you put yourself aside and moved towards someone else instead? You don't have to remember a dramatic moment. It might have been something small. Staying a little longer, listening when you were tired, saying something honest when silence would have been easier. What did that feel like afterward? Something might have been there, a kind of quiet that isn't quite rest, but isn't quite effort either. Take a moment. Don't rush to name it. Just let it come back, if it wants to. A woman once told me she had driven 40 minutes out of her way to drop off a meal for a neighbor she barely knew. She said she sat in her car afterward, engine off, not ready to go home yet, just sitting there in the dark, not sad, not proud, not really anything she could explain. That parking lot was her temple that night. She didn't need incense or cushions or the right words. The practice had already happened, right there under the yellow glow of a stranger's porch light. Sometimes the teaching finds us in the places we'd never think to look for it, in a cooling engine, in a quiet street, in the simple fact that we showed up. The aspiration of bodhichitta grows from a root we explored in a previous teaching, compassion itself, and what it truly means in the Buddhist heart. You'll find that episode linked in the description below. After his awakening, the Buddha sat in silence for a while. Then he stood up. He began to walk. He carried his words toward the place where people were. Maybe that walk was the truest form of bodhicitta, not a feeling, not a philosophy, but a direction. Opening outward, moving toward, rather than staying within. We tend to think of it as a sequence. First, take care of yourself, then you'll have something to offer others. Get yourself right, then give. Rest first, then love. But watching the Buddha walk toward the deer park, the order seems different. The turning outward wasn't what came after the awakening. It was part of it. The speaking deepened what he had seen. The giving moved something in him that staying still had not. The opening completed the crossing. When that belief, I'll help others once I'm okay, loosens just slightly, something else becomes visible. Thank you for staying with this until the end. Wherever you are and whatever you're holding today, this place knows you're here. Just as the Buddha opened his mouth in a quiet meadow and let words travel toward 5 people who weren't sure they wanted to listen, may something in what was said today find its way to wherever it's needed in you. And if it doesn't land today, that's all right too. The words he spoke at the deer park weren't heard perfectly by everyone who was there. One of the 5 almost walked away. Pause. Whose face came to mind while you were listening today? One story a day. In a week, your words will change. In a month, your eyes will change. In a year, the same world will look completely different.